This is the Bot City Podcast, and I'm Jet West. Our show today is about SpaceX's bold ultimatum: accept a massive $60 billion offer or walk away with a $10 billion breakup fee. So, SpaceX, the company that launches rockets, just announced they might drop $60 billion on an AI coding tool called Cursor, or they'll pay $10 billion to work together. Either way, that's the kind of money that makes you wonder if Elon's calculator app is stuck in scientific notation mode. Let me walk you through this because it's genuinely fascinating. And by fascinating, I mean it's like watching someone solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a unicycle on a tightrope made of their own quarterly earnings reports. Cursor is this San Francisco startup founded by a company called Anysphere that makes AI-powered coding assistants. Think of it as autocomplete on performance-enhancing drugs. You tell it what you want to build, and it writes the code. The tool helps spark this whole trend called vibe coding, which is exactly what it sounds like. Developers describing the vibe they want and letting AI handle the tedious bits. It's like being a director instead of a cameraman, except the cameraman is a neural network that never sleeps and doesn't unionize. Now, here's where the valuation trajectory gets absolutely bonkers. In January, Cursor was worth $2.5 billion. By May, $9 billion. By November, they closed the Series D at $29.3 billion post-money valuation. That's a 12 times increase in 10 months. They were about to raise another $2 billion at over $50 billion valuation when, plot twist, they canceled that fundraising round because SpaceX showed up with this deal. The deal structure is beautifully weird. SpaceX gets an option to either acquire Cursor outright for $60 billion later this year or pay $10 billion to work together. According to one source, that $10 billion functions as a penalty for breaking the agreement, which is the most expensive breakup fee since Jeff Bezos' divorce. The timing is deliberately vague, later this year, and apparently structured to avoid delaying SpaceX's planned IPO by not requiring financial statement updates. Because nothing says we've got our finances sorted like a $60 billion maybe acquisition hanging over your prospectus. Let's talk about why this is happening. Because it's not just Musk waking up and deciding to collect AI companies like Pokemon cards. SpaceX merged with xAI, Musk's AI venture that makes the Grok chatbot, back in February. Shortly after, Musk basically admitted xAI was getting demolished in the AI coding tools race and committed to rebuilding from scratch. They even did a round of layoffs in March. Then, conveniently, two senior Cursor engineering leaders, Andrew Milich and Jason Ginsberg, left to join xAI, reporting directly to Musk. Musk welcomed them by tweeting about orbital space centers and mass drivers on the moon, which is very on brand but doesn't exactly clarify their job descriptions. So you've got SpaceX/xAI acknowledging they're behind, poaching Cursor's talent, and now potentially buying the whole company. It's the corporate strategy equivalent of, if you can't beat them, acquire them for the GDP of a small nation. Here's what SpaceX is actually buying or partnering with, depending on which option they pick. Cursor has distribution. They've got expert software engineers using their product daily. They've got brand recognition in the hottest category in AI right now. What they don't have is their own models. Cursor relies heavily on partnerships with OpenAI and Anthropic. They use and sell access to Claude and GPT models, which creates this wonderfully awkward situation where Cursor depends on the same companies now directly competing against them with their own coding tools. It's like if your landlord also opened a competing business in your storefront. Sure, you still got a lease, but you're probably updating your resume. What SpaceX brings to the table is compute power, specifically the Colossus supercomputer in Memphis, Tennessee, described as having the equivalent compute power of 1 million NVIDIA H100 chips. Multiple sources call it the largest supercomputer cluster in the world, which is the kind of thing you say when you're either very proud or very concerned about your electricity bill. Cursor's statement said they've been bottlenecked by compute, and this partnership will let them dramatically scale up the intelligence of our models. Translation: we've been trying to train better AI, but couldn't afford enough GPUs, and now we've got access to a computational fire hose. SpaceX's statement said combining Cursor's leading product and distribution to expert software engineers with their million H100 equivalent Colossus training supercomputer will let them build the world's most useful models, which is a bold claim considering OpenAI and Anthropic exist and have been doing this slightly longer than the company that primarily makes rockets. Let me put on my investigative journalist hat for a second and point out what's murky here. First, the financial picture doesn't quite add up. One outlet describes SpaceX as widely seen to be losing money following the XAI and X acquisitions. Yet they're supposedly preparing for a $1.75 to $2 trillion IPO, potentially the largest in history, surpassing Saudi Aramco's offering. They're targeting a $75 billion raise. And somehow they're going to either spend $60 billion acquiring Cursor or $10 billion on a partnership while bleeding money. The math is mathing, but barely. Second, the timeline of that talent poaching is suspicious. Milich and Ginsberg left Cursor for XAI in March. This partnership was announced in April. Did their departure precipitate negotiations, or did negotiations precipitate their departure? Because if you're Cursor's founders watching your senior engineers get hired away by the company you're negotiating with, that's either very collaborative or very hostile depending on your perspective. Third, nobody's talking about how OpenAI and Anthropic feel about this. Cursor still uses their models, their foundational technology partners. Now Cursor's potentially being acquired by a direct competitor. Will OpenAI and Anthropic just keep providing access, cut them off, raise prices? The competitive dynamics here are like a game of three-dimensional chess where half the pieces are on fire. Fourth, and this is where it gets really interesting, Cursor's own statement about the deal doesn't mention the possibility of being acquired. They talk about the partnership, the compute access, the training infrastructure. Radio silence on the $60 billion acquisition option, which suggests maybe Cursor views this as a partnership with benefits, while SpaceX views it as a partnership with an exit clause. Here's what this means for you. If you're a developer using Cursor, your tool just got a lot more compute behind it, which probably means better models and faster performance. It also means your coding assistant might eventually be owned by the same guy who owns X, which, depending on your politics, is either reassuring or terrifying. If you're in the AI industry, this signals we're entering a consolidation phase. The era of scrappy AI startups is giving way to the era of massive tech conglomerates absorbing them. OpenAI and Anthropic have been on acquisition sprees too. OpenAI grabbed TBPN, PromptFoo, and OpenClaw. Anthropic took Coefficient Bio and Vercept. Everyone's building comprehensive AI product suites before their IPOs because investors want platforms, not point solutions. If you're a software engineer worried about AI taking your job, vibe coding is both a meme and a harbinger. The nature of programming is shifting from writing code to directing AI that writes code. That's not necessarily bad. It's like how architects don't lay every brick. But it does mean the skill set is evolving fast. And if you're an investor watching SpaceX's IPO plans, this deal is either brilliant strategic positioning or a massive distraction. Combining rockets, AI chatbots, social media, and coding tools under one umbrella is either visionary vertical integration or a conglomerate discount waiting to happen? Let me address the Swedish angle real quick because it's delightful. Cursor was co-founded by Arvid Lunemark, a Swede who's about to become extraordinarily wealthy if this deal closes. Swedish media is covering this as a national pride moment. Hometown founder hits the jackpot. Jensen Huang, NVIDIA's CEO, apparently favors Cursor, which makes sense given NVIDIA invested in them and sells the chips powering everyone's AI dreams. But here's what nobody's covering that I find fascinating. The regulatory angle is completely absent from every article. A $60 billion acquisition of a strategic AI asset by a company with massive NASA contracts, and this isn't raising antitrust eyebrows? No review concerns given AI's national security implications? Either regulators are asleep, or this is so obviously getting approved that nobody's worried. And I'm not sure which is more concerning. Also missing, any technical skepticism. Every article treats the logic as self-evident. Cursor needs compute, SpaceX has compute, therefore success. But neither Cursor nor xAI currently has proprietary models matching OpenAI or Anthropic. Will throwing more GPUs at the problem actually close that gap? Or are we watching two companies with complementary weaknesses, hoping they combine into a strength? The customer perspective is also completely absent. How do developers feel about their coding tool potentially being Musk controlled? Data privacy concerns? Cultural fit between rocket scientists and software startup engineers? These questions apparently aren't interesting to business journalists, but they probably matter to the people actually using the product. Here's my take. This deal is a bet that distribution plus compute equals competitive models. Cursor has users. SpaceX has chips. And together they're hoping to build something that competes with Claude and GPT without depending on them. It's a reasonable bet. Whether it's a $60 billion bet is another question entirely. The IPO timing is critical. SpaceX wants to go public at a historic valuation, and showing they've got an AI strategy beyond, we also own the Grok chatbot, probably helps. Whether they ultimately acquire Cursor or just partner probably depends on how the next few months go, both in terms of technical progress and market conditions. What's clear is that Musk is assembling a technology empire that spans rockets, satellites, electric vehicles, brain implants, tunnels, social media, AI chatbots, and now coding tools. It's either a brilliant vision of vertical integration across the future economy or the most expensive game of Monopoly ever played. Possibly both. The $60 billion question, literally, is whether combining these pieces creates synergy or just complexity. We'll find out later this year when SpaceX makes their choice. Until then, we're all just watching the most expensive option contract in tech history tick toward expiration. That's the story. SpaceX might buy Cursor for $60 billion, might pay $10 billion to partner, might change the AI coding landscape, might just be really expensive corporate theater. Check back in 6 months when we know which timeline we're in. Thank you for listening to the Bot City Podcast. If you like this episode, show us some love with 5 stars and a follow. Keep bussin'.
Grab news. Thomas.